So next we're going to have our presentation from the Disability Law Center about transition and your rights and the district's responsibilities under the law. But I also wanted to let people know that we have a representative here from Easter Seals. Desiree Forte is here, and she's available to answer anybody's questions about transition and what they do for youth for Easter Seals. And we also have a representative from Boston Center for Independent Living here, and they do some youth advocacy. We're hoping both of these representatives will come back in May, where we have a resource fair to talk about a lot of different programming and resources available for families, and we're setting that up for May 22nd, so the SpedPac meeting in May. So does anybody have any questions before we move on to the presentation by the Disability Law Center? Okay. You should already have the handout. We had them available when you came in tonight. Does anybody need one of the handouts?
Okay. Please tell me you need a handout. See me dragging this, so just stick your hand out for me. Very. Okay, where?
We have.
You got them? Ma'am, did you need one? There we go.
I gotta do this one day.
Please let me get one out. I'm there. Nobody? Ah,
Yeah, we did enough of them.
there's one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I like to do it like that.
Thank you.
You can see it. So Pamela, we have one rule tonight.
Say this again, I'm sorry.
See that piece of paper? That's where you need to stand. Yeah, up there.
Stand there?
There you go. Catch it.
I'm just gonna need something
Oh yeah, I'll move on. I got a desk.
How's
over
that?
there. No, fine.
Okay, I finish when, at 9? I just want to make sure I budget my time
Just
properly.
keep going. Don't worry about it.
Just go. Okay, hi. My name is Pamela Coveney. I'm not the whole Disability Law Center. I'm one of its attorneys, and I've been there for 12 years. I'm going to talk to you tonight about legal rights to transition services. I'm going to start out by saying really 4 very smart things, so that if I put you to sleep afterwards, at least you've heard the 4 smart things. The first thing is that, has anybody here ever taken professional driving lessons from anybody? Okay, fine. And you know how they have that dual control car, so that you can't go, you know, run over a bunch of kindergartners, that somebody can sort of control the car. Transition is very much the same way. It's a team effort between you and the school. And you've got to think about that sort of metaphor the whole time you're dealing with schools and transition services. The school cannot do it all by itself, and neither can you. It's a dual process. The second thing is that you need to pretend that you're in this funny kingdom called the kingdom of special education. There are no telephones and there's no email, all right? You cannot ensure that anything is taken care of unless you write a letter. And I'm not bad-mouthing email and saying that it doesn't work, but in the world of special education, if you want to communicate with somebody to tell them that you want something, or that they're doing something that they're supposed to do, you need to forget about all of those fancy smartphones that you've gone out and bought, and you need to forget about telephones, and you need to write a letter. The third thing is that it's really important to start as early as you can to identify the missing skill sets for your student. Where is it that your student is going to need help? I had a good buddy who kept asking her daughter what time it is, and the daughter was reading off of the VCR and didn't know how to tell time on a face clock. And this went on for years, all right? I had my own mother in hysterics one day because I didn't know the name of the Great Lakes, and I was in college, all right? It just never crossed my mind to learn that. So what I'm saying is that you want to start as early as possible to see that your child might need help learning to travel, or to count money, or to tell time, or to learn how to wear weather-appropriate clothing. And the last thing, and this is really important, if there's nothing else that you remember, you do not let anybody, including President Obama or Tom Brady or the Pope, tell you that you must graduate or that your student must graduate merely because he or she has passed the MCAS. That is not so. Transition services are a legal entitlement. And if your student has passed the MCAS and passed all of her courses, but the school has not delivered adequate transition services, that is a violation of the law, and if you catch it in time, you can do something about it. Once your student accepts a diploma, transition services effectively end, and there is no longer any entitlement to special education services. And that is a critical thing to remember, because in many instances, kids on the autism spectrum or kids with other kinds of disabilities do fine in school and they ace the MCAS, but they're not ready to graduate because they're not ready to take care of themselves. Are you going to one slides for me? Thank you. I've given you a packet of a bunch of things, and I'm going to go pretty quickly because I want to make sure that I allow some time for questions. The Disability Law Center has done a manual for transition services, and it's online. And the way you find it is to go to our website, and on what would be your left-hand side, there's a picture of a young man with glasses, and there's a link under there, and that's how you get to the online manual. We've also done a user-friendly, downloadable manual that you can download and read. It's very, very long, and it is incredibly useful, all right? I thought that I'd be able to bring one for each of you tonight. I wasn't able to do that because we just ran out. If you look me in the eye and are very sad and tell me that you do not have access to a computer, I brought a couple of copies. But you have to be able to look me in the eye, look sad, and tell me that you do not have a computer, because I only brought a few of them. So if you look like you're going to laugh like you just did now, I'm not giving you one, all right? Okay. There's really nothing I can say tonight that is not already in that manual, and it's not something that you read in one sitting, but it is chock full of information. There are live videos on the online version where you get to see me all in my suit talking about various things. We've even got a video from a young woman who's deaf, who just talks about how rough it is to be in high school where other kids don't know how to talk to her. We've got sample letters that are not the Bible, but they could get you started if there's something that you need to say to the school and you need to say it in writing. We've given you a bunch of cases which at times are useful to read, and we've given you a bunch of just general information and strategies. And I can't emphasize enough, if you use a computer, just to go in and poke around and see what's on there. And again, if you look me in the eye and tell me that you don't use a computer, I'll give one up tonight. Okay, let's roll. This is a table of contents that's in the manual, and I've sort of just tried to do the pagination for the hard copy manual. So if you go online, these pages aren't going to make any sense to you at all. But these are the pages for the hard copy version of the manual. And it talks about developing transition services, how to resolve problems, what to do when you go to an IEP meeting and things just don't go the way you want them. It reminds you about 25 times that an IEP meeting is not the Supreme Court. There are lots of levels beyond that. There's a part about student decision making, because does anybody here have a student who's 18? Yeah, okay. In Massachusetts, irrespective of the disability or the severity of the disability, that student is a legal adult. So if you want to stay in the game, the manual and also I are going to talk to you a little bit about what you need to do. Then there's a point where you leave special education and you're going to be, oh, bless you. God, you're a nice person. You want to be aware of how you get certain kinds of adult services when your student is no longer eligible for special education. My former colleague Hillary Dunn does a crack job on the online version. She's got a brother with very serious delays, and she grew up in a household with somebody who had some very significant challenges. She's been fighting for services, or her family has, all her life, and she really walks you step by step to some of the things you need to do. Then at the end, we've got a bunch of laws and cases and a glossary and some forms and some letters. So that gives you just a basic idea of what's in the manual. If you will go to slide number 3, that is basically what I'm going to talk about, and it's there for you to see. I'm going to tell you what transition services are. I'm going to give you an overview of what the timeline is so you can have a sense of when you need to start thinking about this, how to help older students, some special issues that come up, resolving disputes, and all through the manual there are going to be some site, or all through the PowerPoint, where you see a little video icon. That means that we've done a video, that there's going to be a little camera icon, and that lets you know that we've actually got a video so you can see a live person. We've done them in English, in Spanish, and in ASL, and we unfortunately couldn't cover any other languages, but if you speak one of those, you're covered. Okay, this is basically the map that you're going to have to deal with. A free, appropriate public education has a nickname, an acronym, FAPE. And I'm sure you've all heard that term thrown around at you. That's really what your student is entitled to, nothing more and nothing less. From my perspective as an attorney who only represents students and does not represent schools, the legal definition of FAPE is frankly not enough, okay? Because it's just my own view that every student should get the very best that's out there and the very best that's available. And you all need to know that that's not the law, all right? The legal definition of FAPE is a much narrower definition that basically says that your student has to make reasonable progress. And you and the school and a bunch of lawyers are always going to argue about what that is for individual students. The key case was a 1984 case with a young woman named Amy Rowley, and she was deaf. And she was a pretty decent lip reader, so she was doing okay. She had friends, and she was in a classroom, and she was she was being promoted, is what I meant to say, from one grade to another, and she was earning B's, all right? It turned out that she was only getting 40% of what the teacher was saying because she was lip reading. And if you just turn to the person next to you and say bike, mike, or pike, and you don't say it out loud, they're not going to know which one you say, all right? So lip reading it's not terrible, but it's imperfect, all right? And Amy Rowley's parents wanted her to get a sign language interpreter so she could get the other 60% of what she wasn't learning. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and she lost. All right, because she was being promoted from one grade to another, and she was earning B's, and the Supreme Court said, we don't have to give her the very best that's out there. We don't have to maximize her potential. We just have to do something that's reasonable. I don't like that case. I'm sure many of you don't like that case, but regrettably, for the past 20 whatever years, that's what the law is. So when you go for your student and advocate for services, you're not going to get very far to say you guys could do it better, because of course they could, all right? You're not going to get very far to say it would make more sense to do it this way, because that again may be true, but that is not the law. The law is that your student has to be making meaningful, reasonable progress. And if you can show that your student isn't meeting that standard, then you might have a shot at getting something different from what's being done. On the right side, I want to just show a diagram about transition services because they are built on proper assessments, meaning that when your student turns 14, you need to ask for transition assessments. And the obvious question is, what assessments do I ask for? And the answer to that question is that I honestly do not know. However, no, I'm trying to be straight with you guys, all right? But there are people who have done a list of possible ideas that I put somewhere in this packet that says transition assessments example sheet, all right? So there are different kinds of tests that are out there. Some are very informal, where you just get up one morning and check out your daughter. You know, does she know to wear a decent coat on a day like this that's cold? Does she know how to call 911 if you fall down and get hurt? Does she know how to use a ring of keys to get in and out of the house? Can she make a simple meal by pressing the right button on the microwave? Does she know enough to turn the stove off when she leaves? Those are informal assessments, but they are invaluable. And you need to remember that on some of this stuff, you're the only one who knows the answer. By the time you get your student up and out and into school, you might have had a fight about it, but they're not going out in that snowstorm that we had a few weeks ago in their bathing suit. I mean, you've told them, hey, you gotta wear this coat and you gotta wear this hat, and this is the bus that you get on to get to school. And the school doesn't know unless you help them that your student needs help in all those areas and is going to need that help when you're not around anymore. So the first part of a transition process is to get your child tested. And you might want to just hang on to this list as some possible suggestions of some of the tests that might be given. Can I have the next one? Okay, this is basically the timeline. These are the benchmarks and these are the ages that you need to pay attention to. Federal law says transition services are supposed to start at age 16, but Governor Patrick signed a statute to say that in Massachusetts, they start at 14, okay? This is agony for me. I never look afterwards either, because it's just, yes. Nobody mixes me up with Beyonce, you can trust me. Or Tina Turner. Okay, so in Massachusetts, transition services are supposed to start at age 14. It's for the first IEP. I really don't look like Beyonce because this man can't stop laughing. They're supposed to start for the first IEP that's in effect at age 14, all right? So at age 13, you need to start thinking about getting the transition process in place. At age 17, you need to be thinking about whether your son or daughter is going to need help a year later. And you need to be planning for this a year in advance. Because at age 18, when you blow out those candles, or even if there are no candles, your student is a legal adult. And you are not part of the party unless you've taken some steps that I'm going to talk about later on. Your student is on her own. And it doesn't matter whether she's got a serious cognitive delay or is nonverbal or has any other kind of disability. So if you want to continue to be invited places, to meetings, and to have access to see records, you want to be thinking about this. Age 18, as I said, is the magic age, all right? That's when your child becomes a legal adult. Special education eligibility ends in Massachusetts on one of two events, either at graduation or if your student turns age 22. There's nothing you can do about your student turning age 22. You know, God forbid something happens in the, I mean, it's inevitable and you want it to happen, all right? However, where graduation is concerned, if you've got a heads up that the school has not done what it's supposed to do to provide adequate transition services, you have a legal right to say no. And the school may not graduate your student until the dispute is resolved between you and the school, probably at an administrative hearing. This is probably the most important thing I can say. And we've had some parents coming to us on Saturday and saying, you know, they're fitting him for his cap and gown and they're going to graduate him on Sunday. He's not ready. Stop, okay? You know, please don't come to us a half hour before they start playing pomp and circumstance and ask us to stop a graduation, all right? You need to think about this in advance. If the school isn't doing its job to provide transition services and you have asked and the school has either said no or not answered you at all. I'm not standing here telling you that you're automatically going to win, but I am saying that you need to step up and say, no, I object to the graduation. And I'm going to show you in a while where to find the graduation date, because I think it's about as big as an ant's navel. I mean, it's really hard to find it on an IEP, and I want to just make sure that I point that out to you. All right, so in a perfect world, these are the transition steps. You know, I have to tell you that it often doesn't work this way because everybody's in a hurry, and IEP, has everybody here been to an IEP meeting? Yeah, and you find a lot of times that they rush you, okay? Or, oh, all right, time out, I got a solution for that too, okay? I got a solution for that too, all right? Remember, in the kingdom of special education, nothing counts unless you write it down, okay?
Thank you.
A lot of times, however, legitimately, nobody is trying to do something inappropriate. Teachers have to cover classrooms, they've got to cover the lunchroom, they've got other things to do, they can't give up a whole hour, so they're kind of in and out, all right? Many times people try to do everything in one meeting, but what I'm giving you here is my fairy tale view of the way this process is supposed to work. The first thing is that at home with your student, if your student is able, you execute the transition planning form. And that one is one of the colored ones here, is this yellow one, all right? You want to sit down with your student and say, what do you want to do when you're no longer in high school, okay? What do you want to do after high school? And you want to plan a vision, all right? Then you want to think about the necessary skills to get there. And this you should do before you set foot in the school, all right? The next thing is to have meeting number 1 and to bring this form with you and to say, this is my student's vision and this is what I think my student needs to learn in order.
Do you have any of those, or do you want me to?
Do I have any of them?
Right.
These guys are all part of your packets.
No, we just copied your.
They are not part of your
All we
packets.
have is your presentation.
All of them are in that brown bag.
Or can we download it? Are they in the download manual?
Yes, they should
And I will
be.
have that reference on our site as well.
Yes.
In your brown bag.
I can hang around and give everybody a second set of handouts because they're in my brown bag.
Can we look?
Yes, please. I don't think there's anything, my comic books or anything. So they're attached to the, see, I told you to take the PowerPoint from me and you wouldn't listen.
We were just trying to be helpful.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Okay, next thing. This form is really critical to get the process started, guys. I mean, it's really a trigger so that you can really learn what it is that your student wants to do and you can start thinking about what skills he or she needs. Okay. You need to ask for assessments at this first meeting and say, I want a vocational assessment, or I want an assistive technology assessment, or I want a life skills assessment. And there are all kinds of people out there who know how to do these tests to figure out where your students' strengths are, where your students' challenges are, and most importantly, what your student likes to do, all right? And then when you get this intersection of what somebody likes to do and what they're good at, you know, you're good to go. All right, the next thing is there should be a second meeting, in my view, to review the assessments and to develop IEP goals and plans and services. Then you need to check a graduation date, okay? To make sure that the school is not suggesting a graduation date that you don't agree with, all right? And that is critically important because it appears on the IEP, and I really don't mean to be facetious, I'm just saying that the space on the IEP is small, and they write it in with a whole bunch of other print, and it's just the way the form is designed, and it's very easy to miss it. And if you think that your student needs to be in school till age 22, you want to make sure that the IEP isn't saying that your student is scheduled to graduate in June. I mean, what's that? That's 3 months from now, all right? So this is an important thing to watch out for. You want to talk about adding services to an IEP or enforcing existing ones. And in my experience, Most of the hassles with schools fall into one of those boxes. You either want more services in an IEP than are there, or the services are already there, and for whatever reason, the school isn't following through and honoring its commitment. So you want to talk about that at the meeting. May I? Okay, we already talked about this, completing the transition planning form and completing the vision statement and asking for a meeting, so we can move on. Okay, the first meeting where you come and you meet with the school, as of age 14, the school is supposed to invite your student to the meeting, all right? It's your call whether or not the student comes. I think we all know that some students really cannot effectively participate in a meeting, but a lot can. Or even for part of the meeting, to say, you know, I want to go work for the T, or I want to work in music, or I want to do something, and here are some of the things I'd like to learn. I want to be a musician, but I don't know how to read music. You know, I mean, students are supposed to be part of this process if they can. You want to bring the transition planning form. You want to ask for assessments, and the way to ask for assessments is important because, once again, you want to make certain that you do things in writing. And there's an evaluation consent form in your packet, if there's a God in heaven, and it enables you, bingo. It's this one here with the boxes, okay? And what's good about the form is that there's some boilerplate assessments in the upper left-hand corner. Educational, psychological, and health. What's not good about the form is that there are other assessments that your student might need that are not in here. And you need to read the form carefully, sometime when you're not in a hurry, because at the bottom, there's a place for you to write in an assessment that you think your student might need. Your student might need a speech-language assessment, or an assistive technology assessment, or an occupational therapy assessment, and there's room here for you to write that in and say, I additionally request the following assessments, and then there's some lines there. This form is useless until it is received by the school. And I say this 50 times a year, and when I get lucky, maybe 3 out of the 50 parents to whom I say it will listen to me. When something is really important, you send it by certified mail, because somebody has got to sign for it. And then you don't have to worry later on about proving that you've sent something. It's not your problem anymore once you send it in a way that you know the school is going to receive it. And the person to whom you send it is that contact person that's listed at the top of your student's IEP. It's going to say team leader, or school contact, or educational contact.
Sped coordinator.
Thank you very much. SPED coordinator. That's the person where you want to send it to. Even if that person has gone to Tahiti for the week, you know, somebody is picking up her mail because everybody knows that she's the one who's responsible. This is an important form. I must underscore that all of the various timetables do not start running until this form is received, not when you send it. So the next question that everybody asks me is, well, what if I hand deliver it? And my answer to that is, if you go in with a video crew, that's great, okay? But if you're just walking into a school and handing something to somebody, you want to make sure that you bring 2 copies and you have somebody date stamp it. This is all about proof, so that when you come to an overworked lawyer like me, you can hand a bunch of paper and say, this is what I've done, okay? And I don't have to worry about proving a he said, she said, all right? You've got a document that says, I asked for this eval. Because if they say no, they have to give you a reason, all right? Okay, ma'am.
Where do you get that form? Do you get that off the GUE's website?
Yes, and if you'll go to our manual, there's a link to get this form. You can also get it on DOE's website. They're still calling themselves DOE.
Well,
So on that left-hand panel, there's going to be sort of a blue vertical rectangle, and there's going to be a link that says IEP forms in English. And if you click on that, My computer takes a while, but you'll eventually get to a bunch of forms, and if you go about 2/3 way down the page, there's one form for little kids up to 6 years old, and then there's another one for everybody else, all right? Any form that I give you here, even though it's in color, it will still do the trick. I did them in color so that I could find them easily. But, you know, you can obviously copy it in black and white and you're good to go. But I must underscore that if you use our transition manual online, if you use a computer, all of this stuff is in there. The manual is unwieldy because there are a whole lot of pages in there. But it's all in there, and the table of contents pretty well walks you through everything, and I'm really urging you to make use of it. Okay, so meeting number 2, you're going to talk about these assessments that you've asked for, you're going to develop goals, you're going to plan services, and you want to pay attention to community placements. We went to federal court on behalf of a young man with Asperger's, and he said he wanted to work on computers. And the school put him in a small closet-type room and gave him a bunch of computers to work on, and he was happy as a clam because he was working on computers, but he wasn't getting any community experience. He wasn't learning how to travel to a job, how to interact with a boss, how to meet with coworkers, and he didn't know how to travel. He really was kind of phobic even about crossing the street, all right? And if these are challenges that your student has, you want to ask the school, what kind of program do you have to get my child in the community? Slide. Ma'am, sir, sorry.
Assuming that the school has nothing at the moment in terms of community placements, who out there might be working, what other agencies might be working on those types of programs at the high school level?
The question was, assuming that the
The
school
school has no community placements.
has no community placements,
I mean, they may not. They,
where do you find them?
how would you suggest, assuming there's a role for parents in terms of making some of this stuff happen?
Okay.
How would you, is there anything in the manual, not to put you
Yes,
off
there
on
is
too much
stuff
of a
in the
tangent,
manual. First of
but
all,
is
did
there a way-
everybody in the back hear the question? Okay. Community placements, if they are necessary, are a legal entitlement. They are not necessary for everybody. But if you've got a track record that your particular student needs to learn to travel, needs to understand basic safety, needs just to navigate in the community in the way that everybody does, you need to write a letter to the team and to say, I'd like this IEP to have some community placement for my student, some job opportunity, some field trip, some outing. And this is where it gets tricky. I'm pointing you later on to a case called Lessard. And it's not a great case for us, okay? Because the parents didn't like the community placements that the school had chosen, and they lost. Because the court said, the school doesn't have to give you the exact community placement you want, and this school had given some. If, on the other hand, the school doesn't offer any community involvement or placement, and you really can show that your particular student needs some, you need to just go through the regular dispute resolution process that I'm going to talk about later on, and we talk about it in the manual, and there's even a video of me, all right, going through the whole dispute resolution process. And I'm not sugarcoating any of this. This is not an easy process. One of the reasons that it's not easy is that it's new for most of us, all right? The case that I worked on that really sort of clarified certain things is not that old, all right? I think we were in court about 3 or 4 years ago. So schools all across the state are trying to catch up, and you have to help them. It's what I said about that car with the dual pedal in it, you know, it's you and the school. You might find somebody in your neighborhood who's willing to give somebody an internship, okay? Or who's willing to let somebody job shadow. And it's supposed to be a team, guys, all right? So you've got to kind of help contribute to the whole mix. Ma'am?
So that just happened with my daughter at her IEP meeting. I had friends who offered my daughter a job And so Strive has come in and they're gonna help with some travel training and some supports, but it's up to me as a parent. I have to go to the job site and I have to find out what the requirements are for her to work there, and then Strive will come in afterwards and help to put those things in place and help with the supports. So I ended up finding her a job because it was a friend of mine, but then the district through Strive is coming in with some of the supports for her. So
Okay.
it hasn't happened yet, but I'll
Yeah,
report back.
and there's no bright lines standard that I know of in the law about how much you have to do and how much the school has to do. What is very clear is that the school doesn't have to do the best, okay? So if you've got a better idea, you owe it to your son or daughter to just put it out there and see if it will fly, just as your colleague did. Yeah. All right, this one I like because I want to talk a little bit about designing goals. And let's just assume that your son comes and says, I want to be a chef. And the obvious skill that that person needs is what? Come on. All together now. Fine, okay. And that one is a no-brainer, all right? But think about all the other pieces to that. If the person is going to get a job as a cook, he's got to get there, okay? And he's got to figure out what time he's supposed to be there. And he's got to figure out how to read labels, he's got to understand basic safety, probably some first aid, some hygiene, so that he understands that an apron cannot be used to wipe the floor. And probably, because I'm told in restaurants, they've got little teams in the back there, and Henri, the chef, makes something really fancy, but they're groups of people who are dicing onions and other people who are mixing sauces and other people who are doing whatever, all right, peeling onions, all right? And maybe your son or daughter is used to cooking all by himself, all right? And he might have to learn how to do that collaboratively. My own mother wouldn't let you near her when she was in the kitchen because that's just the way she did it, you know, and she wasn't used to this collaborative thing, you know. Go collaborate someplace else, but not with me in the kitchen. So the point is that there are a whole bunch of skills here that somebody needs to have, and you need to break it down. And really almost to be simplistic, because your son may be the best chef in the universe, but if he can't tell time, and if he doesn't know how to use the green line, which I did, I'm not from Massachusetts, and I wept openly when I went into the green line because I just couldn't figure it out, all right? And these are the kinds, I'm still crying, and these are the kinds of things that people need to know. Sir?
No.
Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, I want to talk about signing an IEP because I listen to too many people who tell me I get mad and I reject the IEP. And if I could, I would stand on the chair and tell you under no circumstances, subject to very few exceptions, do you reject an IEP completely. The one exception that I would offer is that if there is a previous IEP that you like better, all right? Because then the last IEP that you sign is the one that is going to hold. Other than that, find something that you like on the IEP, the penmanship for heaven's sakes, and sign it, all right? Because if you do not sign an IEP and there isn't one that precedes it, your son or daughter gets nothing. Because you are basically saying to the school, I don't want any services at all right? So let's talk a little bit about the different ways to sign an IEP. And I gave you this paper, which is the IEP signature page. All right.
I have a question.
Sir, nice and lovely.
Is rejecting the IEP the same language as requesting to reconvene for
No.
monthly IEP meetings?
No. Let's talk about that. Everybody hear the question? Tell me in the back, because I'm a little...
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Is rejecting an IEP the same as requesting to reconvene? No. What it says here, and let me go through all of the options, and then maybe I'll answer your question a little better. All right. If you say, I accept the IEP as developed, you're saying to the team, this is just an ACES IEP, and I agree with everything, and I love it, okay? And I love everybody who wrote it, all right? If you say, I reject the IEP as developed, you're basically saying, I don't want this IEP at all, okay? and I do not want the services, and I'm out of here, all right? And you are fine if there is another IEP that predates it. If you reject the 2014 IEP and there's a 2013 IEP that meets all of your students' needs as you see it, you are fine. Your student is entitled to what under the law is called stay put. And that previous IEP is the one that's valid. But if there's no IEP at all, and you reject the one that's offered to you, you are basically saying, I don't want any services for my student. And I'm saying that with almost no exceptions that I can think of, you shouldn't do that, all right? Unless you're prepared to go sue the next day, okay? Because rejecting an IEP puts your student at square one. And we don't have time to get into discipline, but having an IEP gives your student certain protections if he or she gets suspended that are not in place if your student has no IEP. So it is extremely important for there to be a signed IEP. It's like your American Express card. I mean, you just really need to have one. All right, to the gentleman's question, the third way to sign an IEP is to accept it in part and to reject it in part. And when you reject it in part, what you are saying is, I disagree with the fact that you're only giving speech language 2 days a week because I think my son needs it all 5 days, all right? And I don't like the fact that you're only giving it for 2 days. And I want to come back and meet with you to discuss that. But meanwhile, everything else that you do not reject, the school is obligated to deliver. And that, not to be too colloquial, I call that box the slick box because it shows that you understand the system. You're saying, I'm rejecting the fact that you're not doing certain things that I want. But while I'm fighting with you over that, you're obligated to give the rest of the stuff that I did not reject. And your student gets some services. Have I been clear about that? Because that's really, really critical. And it's okay to shake your head and tell me I'm not clear, because that's important. All right, fair enough. Okay,
So
let's,
it's like,
sir.
it's like they don't lose the IEP by being able to say, I'm gonna accept part of it.
That is
But,
exactly, I got
I'm
you,
gonna
ma'am.
reject.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
The gentleman's question is that, do they lose the whole IEP by saying I reject it in part? And the answer to that is no. You are accepting part of the IEP, and the rest of it you are rejecting, and preserving your right to argue all the way to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals if you have to, all right? But meanwhile, while that fight goes on, your student gets other services. Ma'am?
So basically, if you had a previous IEP and you were requesting an additional service that is not included in the new IEP, you can still accept that part and then just write the rejection because of what was not added?
Yes. Give me one service so that we can get an
ABA
example.
services.
I'm sorry?
ABA services.
Okay, fine. Let's just say I have a daughter and she's on the spectrum and there are no ABA services in the 2014 IEP, okay? The 2013 IEP had them, okay? If I reject the 2014 IEP totally, the 2013 IEP holds, and those ABA services have to continue until I fight it out with the school at a hearing. If I take the 2014 IEP and I sign what I call the slick box, and I say, I disagree with the fact that you took away these ABA services, but I am accepting the rest of the IEP. They have to give you the rest of those services, and you reserve your right to challenge the fact that they're not giving you the ABA services. Any service that is in an IEP cannot be taken away unless you sign off on it. And a distressing thing to us at the law center is that parents will call us and say they took away the ABA or they took away the speech language, and they can't take away anything unless you agree. But what happens is that a lot of times parents are not aware of the fact that they have a right to disagree, all right? And that you go beyond a team meeting to resolve disputes. It's hard to say things on camera because it'll come back to haunt me, but I tell just about every client I have ever had that I expect to lose at a team meeting. It's not a courtroom, all right? I'm in a room with a bunch of people who see it differently from the way I see it, and that's their right. And that's not the place where we're gonna resolve it. In some instances, if it's a really serious disagreement. You know, I advocate for my client, and I frequently don't win at that level, all right? But I'm not worried about it. I want to be able to show that I've gone and tried to work it out, and then I'm out of there, okay? I've gone and filed at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals the same day I've gone to a team meeting. There is no point in sitting there and arguing with people who see it differently from you, all right? It's an hour meeting, for heaven's sake. So if you're really that far apart, how are you going to come to some agreement in 60 minutes when somebody's getting up and has to go cover a geometry class? That doesn't mean that anybody has to get angry. It just means that that's not the forum in which to resolve it. And I'm going to talk about that later on. Okay. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine. On this form, where there's the signature page, this is where you're going to find the proposed graduation date, and it's really small, okay? It's right up here under additional information, and I sort of blew it up on the slide. It says, include the following transition information, and I bolded it, but it's not bolded on the form, the anticipated graduation date, and then they're going to write in a date. You need to check that every single year, so that if there's a date on there that you don't agree with, you disagree with it in writing, all right? If you disagree in writing and file at the Bureau and say the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, they may not graduate your student until the dispute is resolved, all right? This is extremely important because it's very hard to unring a bell. If you sign off on something and say, I agree, it's not impossible to undo that and to say, well, gee, I didn't understand. But it's not the easiest road to take, and it's not something that you really want to be bothered with. You want to challenge a graduation date if you feel you need to. Ma'am? Okay. These are the things to consider when you've got a student who's 18, if you pull out the purple. You all know that your student becomes a legal adult in Massachusetts at age 18. Just suppose your student is nonverbal, or your student has a very serious disability, or your student is just not able, for whatever reason, to advocate for herself, all right? And you don't want the whole decision-making authority that you've had for 18 years just to stop abruptly. You want to stay in the game, so to speak. This is a useful form that we drafted that just says what it tells you it says. Your student can delegate shared educational authority to you, meaning that you and the student are a team, all right? And any document that is presented to the student, you need to sign off on too, because you and your student are sharing authority. Your student might delegate full educational authority to you, so that even though your son is 19 years old, you're still calling the shots because your son has said, I'm delegating. The last option is full guardianship. My office doesn't really advocate guardianship as just a policy, because you're really taking away somebody's complete autonomy, but I'm sure that all of you know that in certain circumstances it's necessary. But the point of this is to show you that you don't have to go to the end zone to go to probate court and get guardianship for your son or daughter. You can do some other things that are interim steps. This is the form that we've drafted. Has anybody heard from his or her school when a student is about to turn 18, just explaining? Okay, so a school did give you a heads up, ma'am? Okay, did they send you any kind of form?
No, we did get a form, but we signed, just a blank piece of paper that my son wrote out, that he gave me permission to do that.
Okay, did everyone hear the lady? The school gave her a blanket, okay, fine. So, some schools are doing it and some are not, but the point is that you need to start talking to your student at about age 17 to say, hey, do you still want me in the game? Because if you do, we need to do something about it, because without this form, the school wouldn't invite you, ma'am, to team meetings, you wouldn't have access to any records, and you wouldn't be able to communicate with them about any educational decisions. So it's very, very important.
Pamela?
Ma'am,
Excuse me again, I'm
where are
sorry.
you? Oh.
I'm sorry. But this is only while they're in school still. This has nothing to do once they leave for adult services. Is that correct?
Absolutely,
Right.
yes. Okay, and that's what the form looks like. I just blew it up for you. The student's signature is at the bottom left. It has to be signed in front of an IEP team member. So you just take it to the school for a team meeting. Thank you. Okay, my colleague, these little icons are meant to be movie cameras. My colleague Hillary Dunn, former colleague, did an absolute bang-up job on our online manual about explaining adult services. Her brother has something called, I think, Angelman syndrome, and he's got some severe challenges, and Hillary is very, very passionate, very eloquent, and she talks a lot about the steps you need to take for adult services. You also need to be thinking about what's called a 688 referral. And a 688 referral is just really a heads up to an adult service agency that your son or daughter is lined up and about to come into the adult service system. This should be done before your student graduates, and it must be done by the school. And we've got stuff in the manual about that. There's also a very, very good video by my colleague Linda Landry, who's one of the national experts on Social Security, about when your student can work and still keep Social Security. And, you know, she does all kinds of really fancy formulas about, you know, how much people are entitled to, and there's a lot of really, really excellent information on there, and I would really strongly encourage you to look at that video. Okay, I want to talk about problems within IEP, because the way I figure there are only really two, and I want to talk about what to do, all right? The first set is on the left, where, to the lady's point, ABA services are not in the IEP and you want them in there, okay? Eventually, any dispute about what you want to go in an IEP that's not already in there needs to go up to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. Most parents who go to the Bureau lose, and that's not because the process is unfair, all right? The reason is that it's not enough just to say, I want this for my son, or I want this for my daughter. That is not the legal standard. A hearing at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals is a mini trial, and you need an expert to say, this is a person who's on the spectrum, he or she needs ABA services. Does everybody know what ABA services are? I'm sorry.
No.
Applied behavior, ma'am? Once again, nice and loud. Applied behavioral analysis. It's a special kind of counseling or therapy for people who are somewhere on the autism spectrum. But let's say speech language. Let's say your son has a severe articulation problem or a stuttering problem, and you think that there should be more services in the IEP to help with that, and the school says no. Or we'll give you some but not all, all right? In order to win, it's not enough for you to go up against the school by yourself. You need an evaluation done by somebody who's done it with the accepted methodology for evaluating, and then you need to present it to the team. Anytime you have new information and you present it to the team in the form of an evaluation, the team must meet with you to consider the evaluation. Please note, I didn't say they have to agree with you, but they must meet with you. But an evaluation is not a letter. all right? Or something that somebody has written on the back of a prescription to say, you know, give him more. It needs to be an evaluation that's done with the standard tests that are accepted in the field by a licensed credentialed professional. And anytime you have a new eval and you bring it to the team must consider it. You do not have a legal right to bring back the same eval that you took before that they didn't agree with, okay? They're not gonna revisit the same document. And I think you can figure that if every parent in Massachusetts did that, the whole system would collapse, all right? But if you have, I have you, ma'am, if you have new data and you give it to the school in the accepted format by writing to them and saying, I have this new eval and I want you to consider it, that is the way to get the school to consider adding services to an IEP. And I'll get to you in 1 minute. The second problem that you run into with IEPs is where the service is already in there, all right? The ABA service is written right in the service grid and the school isn't delivering, all right, for whatever reason. The ABA person might have transferred or gone on maternity leave or just isn't doing the job, all right? The recourse there is different because you've already got the service in the IEP, all right? What you're now trying to do is deal with enforcement. And what you want to do is call program quality assurance. And in your materials, hopefully, I've given you their homepage. The liaison for Boston is the person that you want to call. And her name is Alexis Glickman. If you call Program Quality Assurance, they will hook you up with the Boston liaison as soon as you ask. If you speak any language other than English and you tell them that, they are required to find some way to translate for you. And I need somebody to change the slide for me, please. All right, so what do we have here? Okay, this is my favorite slide. I made those diagrams all by myself. All right. I've given you program quality assurance, and there is a phone number for the person that you to call if there's something in the IEP that the school is not delivering. The reason I did this, and everybody in my office laughs at me, but I'm really very proud of this, because basically what I want to show is that a team meeting is a very, very useful process, but it is a very low rung on the ladder of resolving disputes. There are many levels beyond that. So you need not get discouraged if you go to a team meeting and the school doesn't agree with your version of what your son or daughter needs. After a team meeting, the next thing you should consider is inviting the school to go to mediation. And about 80% of the mediations result in some kind of agreement, because there's a third person there who just brings a fresh set of eyes and ears to the whole process. Where that dotted line is just sort of my judgment call as to where you should probably be talking to a lawyer if mediation doesn't work. Once you file a hearing request at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, if you want one, you're entitled to what's called a resolution session. So where the school has a right to decline mediation, because mediation is voluntary, once you've taken the trouble to sue, a resolution session is not voluntary. The school must meet with you to see if they can work something out. If that doesn't work and both sides have a lawyer, there's a process called a settlement conference where the head of the Bureau of Special Education Appeals meets with both sides. She has a success rate of over 90% because what she does is she meets with each side separately and she assesses the merits of each side's case. So if it looks like I'm going to lose, in her view, I'm going to talk to my client and say, I don't know where we, really need to take this further because we might not have a strong success of winning. On the other hand, if it looks like I'm going to win, the way the law is structured, if I take something to hearing and I go all the way to the end and I get a final decision in my client's favor, the school district not only has to give my client the relief, but it has to pay attorney's fees to the law center that are based on my number of years out of law school. And as you can see, I'm quite old, so nobody wants to pay fees for that length of time. It's just not fun, okay? So these are all of the steps that you have after a team meeting. Ma'am, there was a question?
I guess it was kind of a question, but more of a statement.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
Kind of a question, but more of a statement. But earlier you were saying that if you have a new evaluation done and you present to the school, if the question was, it doesn't automatically trigger that the new meeting, does it? I still have to, in writing, say, I am presenting you this new evaluation, and I want a meeting to go over the.
I'm gonna need a relay help, I'm sorry.
The question is, she just wants that if she gets another evaluation done, she still needs to take the step of requesting a reconvening of the team.
Yes, in
Correct.
writing. And you need to share the evaluation with the team. I want to be very clear that they don't have to agree with you, but they must meet with you if you've got something new. And I had a SPED director make a point a few weeks ago because it didn't say evaluation at the top. You know, it looked like a clinical note. So I see somebody nodding here. All right, so you want to be very careful that it is an evaluation because that's kind of a term of art. It means that somebody used a test as opposed to just having an office visit and then writing some notes. Because office visits occur all the time and evaluations are just, you know, kind of a notch up. I think, I don't hear anybody snoring, so that's a good thing. And I think I'm finished. The one thing I wanted to share with you is this adolescent autonomy checklist. It is a very, very useful document that it's just got a whole bunch of skill sets on the left-hand side. Familiarity with contents of packaged food, folding clothes, helping take care of siblings, and it gives you a chance just to write down what your particular student skill set is. It is a wonderful trigger for you to just think of the kinds of things that you've really forgotten that you're doing for your child because you're doing them every day. All right, my mother tied my shoe until I was older than I want to tell you because I was an only child. There was no need for me to learn, you know. The point of it is that this is a very, very good trigger for you just to help you figure out what kinds of areas the school needs to be helping your student learn. I want to close by thank you for staying awake and also by saying transition services are a legal entitlement. Nobody is doing your student a favor. And I hope that you've got some ammunition now, not to treat this as a fight, but just to really go and advocate as strongly as you can for some of these services for your kids. And thanks.
Thank you guys, sorry it ran really late. So again, we have the general issue forms. If anyone has something that's not working well for them at their particular school, if you can fill those out and get them back to us. Thank you.
It's also available online on the website. So you don't have to
Thank you.
Does anybody need a hard copy of the manual? Remember, you have to look me in the eye and look very sad. Do you use a computer?